Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I have an emotional support cat. Her name is Alice, and she's the cutest, fluffiest, best sonar kitty ever and had the softest meow that you can barely hear unless she really wants or needs you to. Anyway, I have her for my anxiety since I get really bad anxiety attacks to the point where I'm completely unresponsive. Don't talk, move, or respond in any way, I just sit staring off into space, crying and shaking. She's always helped me through them and knows the signs of me starting to get an anxiety attack and rubs up against my hand or face to distract me. I usually get the worst anxiety attacks in crowded, hot and loud spaces or on long car rides or on planes, but occasionally need her just out in public. I was going on a trip to Florida with my dad, but we couldn't get seats next to each other on the airplane for some reason. The girl I got stuck with sitting next to me was some middle-aged woman who throughout the entire flight constantly berated me with questions about my cat. Not the usual how old is she or what's her name questions like why do you have that? And after I explained that I needed her, she asked way more questions and made many unnecessary comments. You don't look like you need her. You just wanted your pet on the flight, didn't you? The flight I was on actually allowed pets as long as they were in their carrier, but Alice was outside and on my lap to comfort me, as that had been an especially hard morning. She also said that I was obviously a delinquent and wasn't new to breaking the rules, probably because I had piercings, dyed hair, and a couple tattoos. At one point, she even told me that I didn't really need her and told me to put it away before she takes her from me. She faked sneezing and coughing to get the flight attendants to make me put her away, but they didn't, because she was wearing her emotional support animal vest, meaning that I need her, and people around me were asked if they had any allergies to cats. She was not one of the people who did, so they told the woman that they could move her to a different seat if she was allergic or uncomfortable, but she declined, even though it would have been much easier for everyone involved. At one point, I think Alice might have sensed that there was something wrong with me, as I was visually uncomfortable and holding on to her tight because of the threat this woman made to take Alice from me, and she meowed. Not directly at the woman, may I remind you that she has the softest meow ever, and she screamed saying that my cat hissed at her, and she was scared because I was holding a vicious animal that needed to be put down because she bit her. Alice has never bitten, hissed, or scratched me or anyone on purpose ever. She doesn't even play fight. The staff told her that obviously nothing was wrong with Alice and asked me if everything was alright. I told them no. After like 45 minutes of this woman's nonsense, she got moved to a different seat. The staff on the flight apologized to me and Alice got a seat of her own and extra treats. I don't know what that woman had against my cat, but I think it's safe to say that she probably a dog person. Edit. This was 2 years ago, and I haven't been on a plane since in fear something like this would happen again. Plus, I feel bad if other people have to move seats because of an allergy. The only trip I went on out of state was last year when me and a few friends went to Seattle. I live in Minnesota. Of course, Alice came and it was great. She loves car rides, and it was much more comfortable for everyone involved. So, next to where I live is a condo complex that has one way in and out. There used to be a back entrance, but it was blocked off with cement barriers probably 20 years ago because HOA didn't want to maintain the road. Summer of 2020, without contacting any local authorities, the HOA has a gate put in across the entrance because they felt people were coming in from elsewhere to use the dumpsters. They even have the owners with a special assessment to pay for it. So randomly, one day, there is a gate right at the intersection for one lane, and the other lane was blocked with pipe bolsters. Not the movable kind, but 6-inch Schedule 8 steel pipe filled with concrete. cemented in the ground. The gate wasn't even closed yet, and even with the limited travel we had back then, it caused backups. If someone wanted to come in when someone else wanted to leave, they had to sort out how cars from opposite directions could both get through. The next challenge came the first time an ambulance was called to the complex. Cars are already jacked up, and now an ambulance is caught up in the mess. Again, at this point, the gates had yet to ever be closed. This is just from cutting down to one lane. So now the local authorities start asking more questions. The HOA/property management company basically said that it's our property. We can get it if we want, which is wrong. You can't obstruct traffic flow on public roadways, much like how a business has to plan for a traffic flow onto the public roadway. Well, after 2 years and countless incidents, this past week the gate and posters just completely disappeared. I don't know what the final straw was, but I'm sure it was good. I hope that whoever decided to just do this at the expense of the owners without looking into building codes or making sure to, at a minimum, do it right, gets their donkey handed to them in court and has to pay every penny back that the owners paid in a special assessment. There seem to be a lot of posts about wanting to take legal action against an HOA, but very few actually do it. So I thought I would share my story. This is not legal advice though. I've been in my HOA for 50 mostly drama-free years until a few years ago when the HOA changed management companies. The new one decided that they were going to be more proactive in enforcement of violations. Not that things were going downhill, they were not. Everyone's home has basically doubled in value over the last few years. They are well-maintained, nice, newer homes in a desirable area. The new PMC, Prompt Management Company, got the board to adopt new rules and registrations and new bylaws. The board had essentially been controlled by one old lady for about 10 years. I will call her Karen. Karen has never liked me and about 6 other families in the neighborhood, and we suspected all along that she would use the new rules to target those she didn't like. Which exactly what happened. Sometime later that year we started getting violation notices via email. For stupid crap. One was for a package left on a porch, one was for a bag of mulch left out. No fines yet, but that came soon enough. Around the same time we decided to paint our house. Part of the process to have the color approved is you have to paint a 3-foot square on the front so the ARC can look at it. And they rejected it. So we painted another one, resubmitted it and waited, and waited, and waited. They never approved and denied the second color, so we waited for the 30-day clock to run out, after which you can assume approval. Then the fine started. With no warning, we got an email stating that we had been fined for having mismatched paint. Yes, they were fining us for painting the squares that they require in order to approve a color. We were also fined for having Christmas lights in the summer. There have never been Christmas lights on our house. This was likely an address mix-up. We complained on the HOA's website but were banned immediately. So far, this was all done via email. But to appeal a fine, you have to send a certified letter to the PMC, which we did, but in the meantime, we spoke to a lawyer who specializes in HOA law. He reviewed our DCCR and all other documents and gave us this advice for the appeal. Just politely say that you do not think that the board has the authority to issue fines. That's it. Don't get into anything further. That's exactly what we did. And the board was gobsmacked in our gal to question their omnipotence and our non-participation in their appeal. They upheld the fines as expected, which made our lawyer very happy. We also learned that someone else had been fined for having too many cars, and someone else got a mowing fine that was intended for their neighbor. This PMC was completely incompetent. Add a fair dose of malice from Karen and indifference from the other board members, and you have a recipe for a mess. What we knew, but apparently they didn't, is that HOAs in Texas do not have a statutory authority to levy fines. That power must be granted in the restrictive covenants, and ours did no such thing. There is also a law which, among other things, states that Before fines can be issued, the HOA must send a certified letter to the owner giving them an opportunity to cure the violation. They hadn't. 209 also states that all board meetings must be open to all owners, and any meetings where rules, registration, or bylaws are going to be discussed must be noticed to all homeowners. They did not do any of that. The HOA was levying fines with zero authority to do so, ignoring state law that dictates how HOAs must issue fines if they have the authority, adopting rules and registrations in secret meetings in violation of state law, changing bylaws in secret meetings in violation of state law. We had them dead to rights and everyone knew it. Texas also has a law that grants attorneys fees to the prevailing party in a suit about violations of restrictive covenants. This usually benefits the HOA but can work both ways. Our fantastic attorney wrote a devastating but absolutely beautiful complaint. It was pure poetry, and I should have it framed. It was served on the board and PMC. I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but I imagine it was pure panic once they spoke to a lawyer who told them they were totally screwed. A few weeks later, we heard that Karen and a couple of other board members had decided that we were just too busy to continue serving on the board and sadly had to step down. There was an election, and now the board is controlled by the very people who have been targeted by their PS fines. The HOA lawyer asked to settle, and we asked for refund all the fines, late fees, and penalties ever issued to anyone over a violation plus interest. The PMC can no longer have anything to do with violations. They can only do administrative things. Revoke all actions taken by the board in the last 4 years. Add a term limit that prevents Karen from running again for 10 years. It doesn't name her but is worded so that it only applies to her. And of course, pay all of our legal fees. We could have gone further, but at this point the bad board members had fled the scene, so we would just be inconveniencing people who have been on our side all along. This was an epic smackdown of an HOA Karen who, because no one ever questioned her authority, had gotten way out over her skis, and it felt really good to see her smug self crash and burn. But a few words of caution are needed. If the HOA had decided to fight, there is a 50-50 chance that we would have lost at the district court level. This is because in Texas, judges are elected and the HOA lobby, CAI, is a huge contributor. Many district court judges will grant summary judgments against any homeowner regardless of the facts. We eventually would have won on appeal, but we had to be prepared to go the distance and pay up to $20,000 or more out of pocket, knowing that eventually we will get it back. And no, HOA lawyers do not work on contingency, and they are expensive as hell. Another word of caution for anyone considering legal action: make sure that you have a lawyer who specializes in HOA law, not real estate law, not your cousin's college roommate who just passed the bar. That deck is stacked against the homeowner, and even with a slam dunk case, it could be ruinously expensive if the HOA decides to go the distance just to screw you over. You are spending your own money to fight. The HOA is also spending your money and that of your neighbors and their insurance company to fight back. A large HOA could spend 100+K and make you do the same just to make an example out of you. You need a lawyer who has done exactly this before and knows HOA law inside and out. At the end of the day, you have to weigh the cost and benefit of a lawsuit just like anything else. In my case, it was worth it because we don't plan to move, and this was the only way guaranteed to stop the PS and get the HOA back on the rails. I run a repair shop where I employ a bunch of local kids, ages 16 plus, to learn skills and make some money while we generally sit around and talk about the whole world while we fix things. We had a client come in with a busted electronic. We fixed it up for her and gave her a decent discount on the work. Her final bill for parts and 4 hours of labor was $100 even, discounted down from $220. She didn't like the bill, she didn't like the work, she claimed that we'd broken something else. She claimed that the kid who did the work didn't know what she was doing. She did, and I had supervised her. And that the kid who helped her in the front room was rude to her. He wasn't. She demanded to see the manager, so I popped out, listened to her tear into my kids, validated how she was feeling, but pointed out that the work she had asked for was done correctly, and her bill was due on pickup of the piece. The last straw for her came when she pulled out a credit card, and I had to inform her that we do not accept that particular card. She literally asked me, "Do you know who I am?" Which I didn't, still don't, and don't care. And I told her we'd take a personal check. She wrote out a check, and problem solved. I deposited the day's checks and got a note from my bank that one had bounced. Her check, of course. I called her the next day to inform her that her check had been returned for insufficient funds, and that she'd need to come in and pay her bill, plus the extra fee for a return check. All of these fees, just to point this out, were clearly outlined on the service agreement she'd signed, and we'd already discounted her $120, just to be nice. Anyway, she rolls up into the office carrying a bag, and I knew exactly what was going on. She drops, of course, a bag of pennies on the front desk. She's breathing heavily. We're on the second floor and she'd taken the stairs. And she announces triumphantly that she's here to pay her bill. She just needs to go get the rest of our hard-earned money. Said with a sneer, of course. The kid at the front desk looks like he's about to cry. So I stop working on the thing I'm working on and take over. "How many more bags do you have?" I ask her. And she says that the nice people at the bank loaded them up in her car. She did not count them. I told her that was fine. We'd wait for her to bring them all up and then settle up her bill. She was expecting a bigger reaction. I think either that or she hadn't thought this through. 10,000 pennies plus the extra $25 weighs a lot, and she just committed to carrying them through a parking lot and up a flight of stairs. One of my kids, bless his heart, offered to help her carry them, and she refused. Finally, shaking and sweating, she deposited the last of the bags on the countertop. The pennies were loose, not in coin rolls. She'd done some work to prove her point. What she hadn't counted on was that we'd need to count the pennies. While the other kids took care of other clients and fixed things in the back, the front desk guy and I counted up the pennies. She started to realize that this was going to take a while, and she tried to leave. I told her that she couldn't leave until we'd signed off on her bill, since at this point she was in violation of her service agreement and had passed a bad check. We couldn't just take her word for it, and I would inform our local constabulary if she left without paying. I was kinda talking out of my butt, but she'd managed to tick me off a little. The other clients in the shop came and went, and we counted. Phone calls came and were handled by my kids, and we counted. She sat down in a chair folding steel, not super comfortable, stood up again, walked around the office, and we counted. After a while, she said, "Just forget it," and took out $125 in bills. We signed off on her agreement, and she started to leave. Another one of my kids, bless his heart, asked her if she wanted help carrying the pennies back to her car. She looked at all of us with a face of sheer panic, mumbled "no thank you, just keep them," and bolted. The whole shop was silent for a moment. Then one of the kids started giggling and nobody could stop. People coming in thought we'd gone nuts, and I finally had to banish everybody to the back room until they could breathe again. We loaded the bags into my vehicle. We used the elevator she'd walked by a few times, took them to the bank and used the coin machine to deposit them. Then wrote out a donation to our local shelter for the amount she dropped off. She posted something nasty on Facebook about it and got ratioed. She had of course posted earlier about what she was going to do, and she got called out with her own post. My favorite response was something like, "You said you were going to pay your bills in pennies. You paid your bills in pennies. What went wrong?" Please do not pay your bills in pennies, folks, especially if you're just doing it to be a jerk. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.